The first thing I remember from that night was the rain. It was the kind of rain that seemed endless, pounding against the streets of Portland, Oregon, as if the sky itself was trying to wash something away. I had just finished a long shift at the small cafe where I worked, exhausted and ready to head home, when I saw her sitting alone on a bench outside the closed bookstore across the street. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, and she looked like someone who had been fighting a battle no one else could see. I didn't know her name then. I didn't know that one simple decision that night would lead to a moment the next morning where she would look at me with confused eyes and ask a question that would haunt me forever. "Last night, did you strip me?" And the only honest answer I had was, "I'm sorry, that was my fault." Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one small act of compassion can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Her name was Rebecca, though I didn't learn that until later. That night she looked fragile, like someone who had been walking for hours without a destination. I remember hesitating before approaching her. In cities across America, strangers are often taught to mind their own business, to walk past people in pain because getting involved can be complicated. But something about the way she sat there, shivering under the dim yellow streetlight, made it impossible for me to just leave. My name is Marcus, and back then my life was far from perfect. I was 28, living in a tiny rented apartment above the cafe in downtown Portland, working long hours just to stay afloat. I had lost my father 2 years earlier, and the weight of that loss still followed me everywhere. Maybe that's why I couldn't ignore Rebecca. Grief recognizes grief. When I approached her, she barely reacted at first. Her eyes were distant, glassy, and tired. I asked if she was okay, but the question felt pointless the moment it left my mouth. No one sitting alone in freezing rain at midnight is okay. She tried to stand but stumbled slightly, and that's when I realized she was barely steady. There was a faint smell of alcohol, but it wasn't overwhelming. It felt more like someone who had tried to drink their pain away but hadn't gotten very far. The rain kept pouring. The streets were empty. I couldn't just leave her there, so I offered the only thing I could, warmth and safety. My apartment was a few blocks away, small but dry. At first she refused, shaking her head weakly, but when the cold wind blew harder and she wrapped her arms around herself, I could see the fight draining out of her. Eventually she nodded, slowly. The walk back felt longer than usual. She barely spoke. The city lights reflected off puddles on the pavement, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and coffee from the cafe's vents. When we finally reached my building, she looked like she might collapse from exhaustion. Inside my apartment, the warmth hit us immediately. I handed her a towel and tried not to make things awkward. She looked embarrassed, like she hated being vulnerable in front of a stranger. I told her she could sit on the couch while I made tea, but then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Her clothes were completely drenched. Not just wet, soaked through. Water dripped onto the floor beneath her. If she stayed like that, she would freeze once the warmth faded. I hesitated for a long moment, trying to figure out what to do. Finally, I grabbed a blanket and some spare clothes from my closet, an old sweatshirt and sweatpants. I told her she should change into them so she wouldn't get sick. She looked dazed but nodded faintly. That's when things became complicated. Rebecca stood up, but she looked so dizzy that I realized she might not be able to manage on her own. She swayed slightly, her balance slipping again. I asked if she needed help, but she didn't answer clearly. Her voice was quiet, almost fading. In that moment, my brain made a decision I would question the entire next day. I helped her, carefully, respectfully, awkwardly. I turned away as much as I could, trying to give her privacy while still making sure she didn't fall. Her soaked jacket came off first, then the wet layers beneath it. I kept my eyes averted, my heart pounding with nervous responsibility rather than anything else. The goal was simple: get her into dry clothes and into bed before the cold got worse. Once she was wrapped in warm fabric and buried under blankets on the couch, she fell asleep almost instantly. I barely slept that night. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, casting soft gold across the room. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, like the storm had washed away the tension of the night before. But then Rebecca stirred. She sat up slowly, looking around the unfamiliar apartment with confusion. Her hair was messy, and the oversized sweatshirt hung loosely around her shoulders. The silence between us was heavy, and then she asked the question. Her voice was uncertain, fragile. She asked if the events of the night were real, and if I had been the one who helped remove her wet clothes. My heart sank. I could see the worry in her eyes, the fear of not remembering something important, and that's when I said the only thing I could say honestly, that yes, I had helped her because she was freezing, and I was sorry if that crossed a line. For a moment she didn't speak. The air felt painfully still. Then something unexpected happened. She laughed softly, not the kind of laugh that mocks someone, but the kind that comes from relief after imagining something far worse. She explained that she barely remembered anything after leaving a party the night before. She had walked through the rain for hours after an argument with someone who had broken her heart. She thought she might have collapsed somewhere. Instead, a stranger had taken her in. That realization changed the entire mood of the room. Rebecca's story slowly unfolded that morning. She had moved to Portland from Ohio 6 months earlier to start a new job as a graphic designer. But the relationship she thought would be her future had fallen apart the night before in a painful, humiliating argument. Walking through the rain had been her way of escaping the noise in her head. Neither of us expected that conversation to last 3 hours. We talked about loss, about starting over, about the strange way life throws strangers together at the exact moment they need someone to listen. By noon, the storm clouds had cleared, and sunlight filled the apartment. But something had changed between us. Not romance, not yet. Something quieter, trust. Weeks passed after that morning. Rebecca and I stayed in touch. Coffee turned into regular conversations. Conversations turned into long walks along the Willamette River. Both of us were rebuilding pieces of ourselves we thought were lost. And slowly, quietly, life began to feel lighter again. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. If you've ever had a moment where a stranger's kindness changed your life, even in a small way, please share it in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who feels alone right now. 2 years later, Rebecca and I stood together on the same rainy street where we first met. The bookstore was still there. The bench was still there, but everything else had changed. She had grown stronger. I had learned that sometimes helping someone else can heal parts of yourself you didn't know were broken. Neither of us planned the way our lives intertwined. It started with rain, a stranger, and a difficult morning conversation. But sometimes the most meaningful relationships in life begin with moments that seem messy, awkward, and uncertain. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe for more stories that remind us how powerful simple kindness can be. Because sometimes the smallest decisions, like stopping for a stranger in the rain, can change 2 lives forever.